Hi, Mark here from Mark's Reviews and Tutorials, and we're going to give you a quick tutorial on how to service a Hayward multi-port valve. These are all very similar inside, but I'll give you a rundown on how to do the Hayward. First things first, we need to just get the top off, and that's just easiest done with a drill. Just take one bolt off. You do need to, particularly if this is still on the filter, grab hold of the bolt so when it comes off at the bottom, you don't drop it. I tend to then put the bolt back on and put it somewhere safe. So go all the way around and take all the bolts off to start. Okay, so all the bolts are off, and then we lift the head off. Got some lovely purple going on there. And the first thing you do is inspect the gasket down in here, making sure it's not torn, not flopping out or torn or broken, and here it is flopping out. See, you can get that on shot. That gasket is still okay, but that needs to be glued back in, and it's actually popping out here, as you can see. So this has been serviced at a good time that it can be glued back in, and it's not destroyed. Apart from that, it all looks good, so that needs to be glued back in. And when you glue it back in, it's very important that it ends up flat so that it can seal. Then having a look here, making sure there's nothing broken, chipped or anything like that. Now that's got a really rough edge around the outside, so I will clean that up. You can either just get a knife and clean it up, or a file or something, just so it's flat. It's just a rough edge on the very outside. And then what we're going to do is pull this valve apart. Now you have a quick look at the pin that's going through here, and this one looks like it's equal both sides, but sometimes they're knurled or a bit fatter, so you have to decide which way you're going to knock it out. This one is okay. I'm going to knock him out here. I'm just going to put the handle halfway between two choices, and then when it sits on the screws, it'll sit up and down for me, so I can knock that out. And we quite simply, I've got a screwdriver which is the right size, smaller than the pin, so I can drive that pin right the way through. And that will come out. So the whole pin will come out, and that does have a knurled end on it. I got lucky there. If it was really tight, I would have turned around and tried the other direction, but we got away with that. So then, just pulling that screwdriver back out again, then the handle comes off. Always a good collection of spiders underneath. Now, the trick to putting this handle on, there's a hole in this bottom plate here, and the handle always has to point towards the hole in the bottom plate, so that's how it goes back together. Take note of the what species of spider it is. Make sure they're not poisonous. But take that little white thing out, that goes back in under the handle. We're going to push that out. We're going to clean all of the dirt out of here, and we're going to mainly just lube this O-ring. Some filters have one O-ring, some have a couple. You see the Hayward here, we've got a stainless steel washer on the bottom, stainless steel washer on the top, spring in between. So that's just a matter of lubing that O-ring, getting all the dirt off, cleaning this up. Now that's nice and smooth. I've got some fine sandpaper. If that's all rough and knurled, you can give it a bit of a sand. Again, you don't want to make it big or out of shape, that'll cause it to leak. But if it's rough, you can smooth it up. So we'll just give this a bit of a clean up here, and then we'll be able to lube it and put it all back together. Just taking this over to the hose and giving it a clean to get all that dirt and so forth out, and particularly down the shaft to make sure that's all clean. Giving it a rinse. Resisting the temptation to do the same thing in here, because I have to glue it. I have to super glue that gasket where it's come out there back in. So I want it dry. So what I'm going to do, there's granules of sand and so forth. I'll just go around dry and work that sand out and get it out. It's flicking all over the place. I definitely don't want that in underneath the gasket when I re-glue that back in. So get that out, give it a tap. Just to get that out. Again, while the filter's off, it is important. See here, there's a bit of muck has been caught up in those strainers at the top, so give that a bit of a clean as well. Just give the whole filter a clean. There's an O-ring under here which seals on the tank, so I'll lube that, but I won't actually do it until I'm back on site, because I don't want the lube going everywhere. I'll just lube it when I put it straight back on. So that's all good. Time for the super glue, and we'll go and we'll glue that gasket back in place, and then we can lube all these O-rings, put it all back together, and then we'll be done. Okay, so when it comes to gluing this gasket in, you normally won't have to do this servicing a valve. This is very rare. Have a look. I'll put a link up just here on my. I've got a video on how to replace a gasket. There is a bit of dirt under there that's going to need to be scraped out because we need this to end up level. So scrape that out. And then tap that out. Yeah, okay, there's a lot of dirt in there. And interestingly enough, there's no glue under this, so I don't know if it's happened through the factory when it was first made, but there's no old glue there to clean up. Normally you've got to clean that up as well. So we just get our super glue. I use a super glue gel so it doesn't dry too quickly, and then put on good liberal amounts for key places. Right the way around. Okay, that's plenty of glue. So then we put the gasket down, and as I said, very important that the gasket ends up flat. So you've got to make sure that it ends up glued down all over. To sit up a little bit high there, so I'll just keep going back to it as the glue's drying. Make sure that she ends up flat all the way around. Because if the gasket, of course, is up, this one looks like it's a bit faulty from the manufacturer, but if the gasket is up, when you're turning your handle, you need to press your handle fully down, which lifts the plate up off the gasket, and then you turn it, it doesn't damage the gasket. But if you only turn it a minimal amount, then this can actually rub on the gasket and wear it off or rip it up. Worst case scenario, rip the gasket out, which then of course it's going to leak. So there we go, that's beautiful, and it's all coming in nice and flat. You can even put that plate in there to give it a press down to make sure it stays flat. That gives it a good even press all over. Okay, so now let's get some lube on and put this valve back together. That's more than I wanted. You don't want to put too much lube on in situations like this because it can actually end up attracting dirt if you get too much on there. So spread that around. You don't want to attract dirt and make grit and things stay up in there, but you do want to put some life into that O-ring. So there we go. And I'm just going to let the weight of that sit there to make sure that glue stays flat. So that's the main O-ring in here. We also then lube up inside the plate where that O-ring runs. Just like that. And then also this O-ring around here, putting lube on it as well, just to help the seal. But this silicone-based lubricant also really makes the rubber last a lot longer, stops it from drying out and perishing. So there you go, that's all good. Now we need to separate ourselves from the base there. We'll put him out of the way. to get this back together, let's do a bit of a spiderweb situation out of there, little spider's nest and all the rest of it. So to put this back together, I'll have a go up here on the bench, but normally you've got to put it down on the ground and stand on it to get it to go back together. So we put this down, we've got one stainless steel washer, then the spring, and another stainless steel washer, and then the plate comes over the top, like that. I'll put it on a solid bit of the table because I'm going to be pressing down pretty hard on it. And then we bring the handle, remembering to line the nib up with the hole, which is down there. And this time we want to line it up with a hole. And then what we need to do is to press this down onto the spring so that the shaft will go through. So we can get that in to start to there. And then press it down and see if we're going to get it to go. Just by hand. As I said, normally you do need to stand on them to get them to stay down. Yeah, no. So I'll put it down on the ground and we'll stand on him to get him to work. Okay, so we've got it down on the ground. We just line up the pinholes to make sure we're square, make sure we're lined up with the hole, and then we press it down. Now, wearing safety boots, of course, we press it down and keep your weight on it so it stays down. And there we go. Tap that in like that. And now that is moving much better. Okay, so when it comes to putting back on, it does matter. Obviously, where you put this is going to make a difference. There will always be a lining up part, and it's right here on this Hayward valve. You see that little notch sticking out? It has, as you spin this around, you'll find one that has a matching notch there. You check your gaskets in place and all clean. And then, actually one more thing, we're going to lube the gasket in there. And also that center spindle in there. That will also help to preserve the gasket. Now, that one didn't need replacing. If the gasket was hard or cracked, or if it had been stretched where it was popped out, then we would have looked at replacing it, but as it is, it's fine. So now we're putting that back in place, lining up the little tabs to there. Okay, then we drop our bolts back in. And again, these bolts are knurled on the Hayward, so hopefully they'll grip, we won't have to hold them. And we put all these guys in. Okay, so get our drill, get it going in the right direction. And then as you do these up, don't do it up tight, it needs to pull down. There we go, and then come across to the other side of the valve and applying a bit of pressure so that it closes. Alright, I'm going to back that off a little bit. But we need to pull this down flat.
Okay.
There we go, that's beautiful. So then, it's just a matter of doing up all of the nuts, and that's it. If you find, like that one there is gripping, if you find they don't, you can either get the right size spanner and hold on, or if you get a screwdriver and just jam it in between the nut and the body here, that'll also hold it, and then do it up till it's tight. I've only got that on about sort of 8. It doesn't have to be super tight. That's well and truly enough. Do him up, and then check your operation. And look at that. That's moving nice. That's the spring you can hear. But the up and down on that valve is now wonderful. So do that up, and then the valve service is ready to put back on the filter.